What's up, everybody? It's Matthew. Thanks for checking into the channel. Today we're going to talk about how to crush writer's block. There is a way to power right through it. Now, the reason I bring this up is because it is late August, almost September. A lot of you are going back to school. Some of you are going back to high school. Some of you are going back to college. Some of you are going back to seminary. Some of you are preachers and you have to preach sermons, or you have lectures coming up and you have to give talks and you're going to write papers. You're going to have a lot of content that you're going to have to do. You're going to have to power through it. What are you going to do if you get writer's block? Are you going to cheat? Are you going to use AI like a wimp, like a weakling? You're going to go on to Google Gemini or ChatGPT and have that write your paper for you? I don't think so. You're not going to do that because you're not a loser and you're not a cheater. So what you are going to do is you're going to power through writer's block whenever you find that you have not much to say. So we're going to talk about how to work through that. Believe it or not, there is a direct technique that you use to power through writer's block. It's something that I personally use all the time. Matter of fact, just this summer, I wrote a 200-page book that's going to come out this fall. It's called Worshiptainment. It's on some of the false practices of worship that we see in the church these days. And we will talk more about that as this channel progresses and we get later on into the fall here and the book becomes closer to publication. All that notwithstanding, though, you are going to have to work through papers or lectures or sermons, and occasionally you find yourself falling short. Now, generally speaking, there are two kinds of people in this world. There are those who have too much to say, and there are those who don't have enough to say, and I guess I'm talking to the latter here. You're writing a paper, and all of a sudden you come up to the brick wall of having nothing else to say. You've written 3 pages, but your professor wants you to write 10. Or you're preaching a sermon and you're supposed to preach for 40 minutes and you've only got 15 minutes worth of material. You're not sure how to apply the text. We're going to talk about that today. If ever you run out of material, I'm going to show you how to power through that. If you're new to this channel, my name is Matthew, one of the pastors here at Gospel Fellowship PCA. We are a Reformed, Bible-believing church just north of Pittsburgh. Now, what kind of person am I? Am I the kind of person that has I never run out of words, or am I the one who falls short? Well, believe it or not, you probably think that I'm the kind of person that never runs out of words. But actually, I'm the kind of person that likes to very carefully prepare what it is I have to say so that I don't run out of words, because I'm not the kind of person that thinks very well on my feet. I don't just sit down and write a 200-page book. I do it by way of outlining, and it's that very technique that we're going to talk about today that is going to help you to power through your own writer's block or your blank page syndrome, whenever it happens to you. So let's get right into it. What is writer's block? Well, writer's block is the inability to come up with anything more to say. It's when you know you should be writing more, but you just can't think of what more you want to write, or you have something to preach or teach or to lecture on, and you're just not sure how to put more content into it to fill up the time that you are expected to fill. Well, let's take an example here, and I think the best way to do this is to just come up with a generic example. So let's say that you are assigned the topic of Plato. You're supposed to write or teach or lecture about Plato. Well, what are you going to say? You're going to try your best to just start talking about him, but you're going to run into that brick wall of the white page and you're going to have nothing else to say. So what we're going to learn here in this video is a technique of dividing every concept into 3 other concepts, okay? So we're going to call it the rule of thirds. You have one thing to say, we're going to turn that into 3 things to say. And so suppose you got a paper to write about Plato. You're not sure what to say about Plato. Well, what you're going to do is you're going to divide that topic into 3 other topics, okay? So we've got a man, Plato, a philosopher. He's a great thinker, great writer. So we're going to divide his whole being into 3 smaller parts: his life, his writings, and his ideas. Now, if you had a biographical assignment, you could do this for practically everybody. You could talk about their life, their major accomplishments, and then some of their ideas that set them apart. So in this case, that's what we're going to do. We're going to take Plato and divide it into 3 parts: life, writings, and ideas. Now, if I only had 1 page to do, I could do 1 paragraph on his life, 1 on his writings, and a 3rd on his ideas. If I've got 10 pages to write, I'm going to need to do 3 pages on each one of those. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to once again subdivide every idea into 3 other ideas. Now you're going to notice that ideas are like Legos. You can take them apart and you can make them smaller. And what you're going to do is you're going to take that idea, make it smaller, and then fill that idea out. So in this case, let's take the second one, his writings, and let's divide that into 3. So now we've got his writings, and we're going to divide that into the Republic, into Phaedo, or Phaedo, some people say, but I like Phaedo, so I'm going to go with that. And then, of course, Crito, or any other number of his writings. And that's one of the things that you're going to notice. is that if you're really honest, you probably have more to say rather than less. And so sometimes writing is just narrowing it down to the main ideas that you can reasonably handle in a particular paper or a lecture. So in this case, we're going to divide his writings into the Republic and then to Phaedo and then to Crito. And then, of course, guess what? You're getting onto it now. You're catching on. We're going to take each one of these and subdivide that into 3 ideas. So let's take Phaedo and let's divide that into the 3 main components of that particular piece. And by the way, it's a very good one. You should probably read it at some point. We'll talk about death, we'll talk about the soul, and we'll talk about the afterlife, which are 3 main ideas that Phaedo works us over on, okay? And if we want to go even further than that, then we can take the soul and we can divide that into 3 more things: the essence, the permanence, and the relation to the body. So you see what I did is I basically just took every single idea and subdivided it into 3 more ideas. And that's how you extend a paper or a lecture or even a sermon, and you get more content out of it. It's like taking a washcloth and learning how to wring it out properly. You can get more drops out of it if you wring it out the right way. So let's say that we're writing this paper on Plato, our imaginary paper, and now what do we have? Well, now we've got a pretty good outline. Now in this outline, you're going to notice that I did not fill out every single aspect. In fact, there's a lot of aspects that I didn't fill out. So remember what we did. We took his life, his writings, and his thoughts, and then we looked at his writings, and we went to Republic, to Phaedo, and to Crito, and then we took Phaedo, and we went to death, the soul, and the afterlife, and then we took the soul, and we subdivided that into essence, permanence, and relation to the body. So we would do that with every single aspect in this entire outline, and before you know it, man, we've got more than just a lecture. We've got more than just a 10-page paper. This could probably be somebody's doctoral dissertation, because if we keep subdividing each one of these things down further and further, then we're going to have more and more content to talk about. And so what you do not want to do is simply sit down with a blank piece of paper and just start writing. Believe it or not, you're going to save yourself a lot of time if you learn how to outline well. And that's the very step that a lot of people want to skip. And this is a bad move to skip your outline because you think you're going to save some time. You say to yourself, you know, self, I'm going to save some time on this one. I'm not going to do an outline. I'm just going to start writing and hope I get to 10 pages. Well, that's probably not going to happen. Probably you're going to actually cost yourself 2 or 3 times or 4 times as much of your precious time if you don't outline than if you actually did. Okay, so where do you get your 3 ideas? Well, here we're going to consult one of my favorite thinkers, one of my favorite theologians. He's a theologian philosopher named John Frame. He was one of my professors. Some people love him, some people don't. That's okay. We'll set that aside. You know, Professor Frame talked about everything in 3 categories. He called these his 3 perspectives, or the tri-perspectival look at life. And Frame could take any topic, subdivide it into 3, and he divided those into the normative, the situational, and the existential. Okay, the normative, the situational, and the existential. Now, I know those are big words, but they really mean exactly what they say. The normative is the norm. Is there a principle? Is there a definition? Is there a concept? Norms are things that you'd get if you looked it up in a dictionary or a systematic theology text or a topic under one of the confessions. If you're into theology, the normative is the principal idea. Okay, so the situational then is how that idea is actually worked out in real life. So it's kind of like the concept, but with tennis shoes on. How does it impact things? How does it impact a church, a person, a family, a city, a nation? And then the existential is that same idea, but how it affects the very individual person. Thus, as it is related to your existence. It's existential. So to say that in another way, the normative perspective is your definitions or your principles. The situational is how it affects the real world. And then the existential is the experience that is perceived by the inner person. Now, Frame, he's brilliant because he takes every theological heading and he subdivides it into these 3 things, and then he works out his full theology based on these 3 topics. Now, I think this is really, really genius because I've done this many times in my sermons. In our church, it's expected to preach about 40 minutes, and so sometimes you have just a block of the text, and you want to say, well, what do I say about that for 40 minutes? Well, divide it into the normative, the situational, and the existential, and you'll have easily enough content to talk about. So let's practice that. This time we're not going to talk about Plato, but we're going to talk about Jesus. Okay, so what can we say about Jesus? I've got to preach a sermon. What do I say about him? Well, he's good. Okay, well, how is he good? Well, let's talk about these three areas: Jesus as a prophet, Jesus as a king, and Jesus as a priest. Now notice these are directly correspondent to the normative, what Jesus teaches, because he's a teacher, how he affects the world, because he is the king that rules over it, and then how he affects me. Well, he is my priestly intercessor who died for my sin. Okay, so there you go. There's the normative, the situational, and the existential. Now, of course, we can subdivide these infinitely as much as we want to, or we can jump straight to the application. And every good sermon, of course, has an application section to it so that the hearer knows what is relevant in this to me. And in any good sermon, you can then make your applications the truth, what it is that you learned, the obedience, how it is that we're supposed to obey it in terms of our lives and our situation all around us, and then how does that affect the inner person, namely love or repentance or belief or hope or joy or whatever it is that you want to do. So basically, you can take this principle, the triangle, and you can triangulate any concept, any topic, any historical event, any doctrine, any idea, and you can extrapolate that into a wonderful, cohesive, a coherent message, topic, paper, thesis, or dissertation. Okay, I hope that was helpful to you. Thank you so much for checking into this video. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you have writer's block, thanks for checking in. Love you lots. Talk to you later.